Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Quiet Hours. Take a moment to let your shoulders relax, unclench your jaw, and allow the world around you to quiet down. Wherever you are, whether it's late at night or a peaceful pocket of your day, this time is just for you. If you're new here, I'm so glad you stumbled into this little corner of the world. If by the end of this story you felt calm, curious, or simply enjoyed the journey, I'd love if you'd subscribe, but only if it feels right to you. And as always, I love knowing where you're listening from. So leave a little time and location stamp in the comments, whether it's 11:04 p.m. tucked in under the covers in Norway, or early morning, somewhere quiet in the mountains. It brings this community closer together. Now, let's begin tonight's journey. Imagine a world so cold, so isolated, that entire communities carved out their lives beneath ancient glaciers, hidden away in frozen labyrinths of ice, far from the warmth of the sun. They lived in silence, surrounded by walls that glowed with a faint blue light. These are the glacial ice caves, breathtaking formations created over thousands of years. Some snake deep into the heart of glaciers, their tunnels smooth like glass, carved by the slow melt of ancient snow. Others are vast, echoing chambers where time itself seems to pause. Step inside one, and the outside world disappears. The wind dulls to a distant hum, replaced by the rhythmic drip of water. Melt from above, whispering through the silence. The air is sharp, clean, and ancient, carrying with it a stillness few places on Earth can match. Somewhere, far above, snow is falling. You can't hear it, but you can almost feel it. Each flake landing softly, pressing down, adding its weight to the centuries. Snowfall is silent, but it tells stories, each layer trapping a moment, a breath of air, a hint of ash, a trace of warmth. Year after year, the sky presses these moments down into the glacier until they become part of the cave's body. For most of us, these places are wonders to be visited briefly and carefully. But centuries ago, before modern explorers stumbled across these shimmering corridors, there were those who went further. They didn't just visit the ice, they lived within it. Why? Who were they? And what secrets did they leave behind in the frozen dark? Before we dive into their stories, let's set the scene. These caves weren't just geological marvels. They were living archives. Layers of ice preserved traces of the past like pages in a book. Ancient pollen trapped in frost. Soot from fires burned hundreds of years ago. Tools frozen mid-use, perfectly preserved by the cold. Each cave was shaped by a slow dance between earth and sky. Snowfall compacted over millennia became glacial ice. Water trickled through cracks carving tunnels. The result was a hidden underworld, fragile, otherworldly, and untouched by sunlight. For early peoples, such caves offered both danger and opportunity. The temperature inside remained eerily stable, frigid but predictable. The walls provided shelter from raging winds, avalanches, and predators. And perhaps most importantly, these icy sanctuaries stored resources, frozen game, preserved water, and natural defenses no human could replicate. So I ask you to imagine, it's thousands of years ago. The world is colder, harsher. Survival means reading the land like a map, understanding its rhythms like a song. Would you dare to step into the frozen dark? Would you build your life beneath ceilings of ice, knowing that a single crack could mean disaster, and that outside lay an even deadlier cold? Some did, and their stories, long buried beneath layers of frost, are waiting to be told. In this first part of our journey, we'll explore the geological heart of these caves, the silent beauty that drew early humans toward them. We'll trace how they formed, why they were so alluring, and how they became the stage upon which some of history's most resilient communities carved out their lives. Take a deep breath. Let the icy air of the past surround you. The journey begins now. To understand the people who lived within them, we first need to understand the caves themselves. Glacial caves form when meltwater, produced by summer warmth or geothermal heat from beneath, finds its way into cracks in the glacier. Over time, this water flows, refreezes, and flows again, slowly hollowing tunnels that twist through the ice like veins. Some caves are small, just narrow passageways lit by faint, ghostly light filtering through from above. Others expand into vast chambers, big enough to hold entire groups, their walls smooth and curved, their ceilings glistening like crystal cathedrals. In regions like Iceland, Alaska, and parts of northern Europe, glacial caves have existed for thousands of years, appearing and disappearing as the glaciers themselves shift. These were transient sanctuaries, their entrances sometimes collapsing, their paths changing with the slow movement of the ice. To find one and survive within it meant understanding nature at its rawest. For early humans facing brutal winters, these caves offered something rare: consistency. While outside temperatures might swing wildly with storms and seasons, the interiors remained steady. A fire built at the right place, near natural vents or rock surfaces, could warm a chamber enough to be habitable, while the thick walls of ice insulated against wind and predators. It's not hard to imagine a small group huddled together, their firelight reflecting against shimmering blue walls, the sound of wind howling outside, but inside, only the gentle crackle of flames and the slow drip of melting ice. To them, these caves may have felt like sacred spaces, both protection and mystery entwined. And so, we stand at the threshold of history and myth, where survival met ingenuity. But these people didn't just pass through. They left traces, artifacts, carvings, subtle marks on walls that speak of stories long forgotten. In the next part of our journey, we'll step deeper into the past, uncovering archaeological clues, cultural whispers, and evidence that reveals how these caves became more than shelters. They became homes and even civilizations. As we step deeper into the cavern, something begins to change. The light from the entrance fades, and with every footstep, the silence thickens. The walls grow smoother, the air colder, the atmosphere heavier. Here, in the heart of the ice, time doesn't just pass slowly. It lingers. It drifts like a pale mist hanging in the air, almost tangible. These frozen tunnels are not just geological wonders. They are archives, vast and silent, storing traces of lives that once flickered brightly in the dark. To walk here is to walk through a library of ice. Each layer a page, each drip of water a word. Archaeologists and explorers who ventured into such caves speak of moments that feel almost supernatural. A sudden chill, a strange echo, the feeling of being watched, not by eyes, but by history itself. It's as if the walls remember. And maybe, in their own way, they do. Thousands of years ago, long before our modern cities rose, small groups of humans ventured into places like this. Some came seeking shelter, others came following herds, drawn by instinct and survival. But a rare few, stayed. Evidence of early human interaction with glacial caves has emerged slowly, like fragments thawing from ice. Charcoal from ancient fires has been found in alcoves deep within frozen chambers, blackening the walls where flames once danced. Primitive tools, bone awls, stone blades, fragments of woven material case have been discovered frozen in place, perfectly preserved by the cold. These were not accidental visitors. These were inhabitants. Imagine it. A family gathered near a fire, its orange glow spilling across shimmering blue walls. The flickering light makes the cave seem alive, like a breathing creature. Shadows ripple across the ice ceiling as stories are whispered in languages long lost. Outside, the world is dark, perhaps a blizzard howls, but inside there is warmth, fragile, precious warmth, created by human hands. Their world was unimaginably harsh, but their ingenuity was extraordinary. Where we might see only danger, they saw potential. The ice was not their enemy, it was their ally. Some caves show evidence of controlled airflow achieved through narrow channels carved into the ice. By understanding how cold air sinks and warm air rises, these early communities found ways to keep smoke from filling their chambers while retaining enough warmth to survive. Others show traces of layered animal skins pressed against icy walls. Primitive insulation, turning a deadly environment into a livable one. The artifacts tell stories that words never could. A piece of worked bone suggests craftsmanship. Charcoal patterns hint at where fires were lit repeatedly, perhaps in the same sacred spot, over many seasons. Even the floor layers speak, compacted snow, flattened by countless footsteps, pressed down year after year. Some researchers call them ice-bound civilizations, small, transient, and fragile, but civilizations nonetheless. Their existence was not built on stone walls or fertile fields, but on adaptability, cooperation, and an intimate understanding of the frozen world around them. And as we imagine them, something extraordinary happens. The cave, which a moment ago felt empty, begins to fill with presence. You can almost hear the distant murmur of voices carried through icy tunnels. You can almost see the soft glow of firelight bouncing off glistening walls. A faint smell of smoke and animal fat lingers in your mind, as if seeping through the centuries. Their lives would have been slow, deliberate, synchronized with the rhythm of the glacier itself. Days would blur into long nights, lit only by fire and the pale light that filters through the ice like moonbeams caught in glass. Outside, survival depended on swift movement, hunting, gathering, migrating. Inside, survival meant patience, quiet, endurance. In some caves, markings have been found etched into icy walls, abstract patterns, swirls, and repeated lines. Some dismiss them as accidental, but others believe these were early forms of symbolic expression, perhaps spiritual. Imagine standing beneath tons of ancient ice, hearing the distant creaks of the glacier shifting above you, and carving a symbol into the wall. Maybe it was a prayer, maybe a warning, maybe simply an attempt to leave a mark, to say, "We were here." As the centuries passed, these cave-bound communities may have come and gone with the seasons. Perhaps they used the caves as winter sanctuaries, returning each year when the cold grew too dangerous outside. Like migratory animals, their patterns would align with the climate's rhythm, returning to familiar chambers where fires had burned generations before. And within these icy shelters, traditions would have formed. Stories told around the fire, lessons passed down, songs or chants echoing against frozen walls. In such an environment, every word would carry, reverberating down the tunnels like a living memory. Perhaps that's why, even today, explorers speak of echoes that sound almost like voices. Some caves hold something even more haunting. Remains. Burials within ice chambers have been found in a few rare sites, preserved better than any grave. Bodies curled against the cold, wrapped in furs, lying as if merely asleep. These were not haphazard deposits. They were ritualized. In the stillness of the cave, they laid their dead to rest, not beneath earth, but beneath eternal ice. Think of what that means. In a world where survival was fragile, these people still carved out space for reverence. They saw these caves not just as shelter, but as sacred places, temples of ice, perhaps connected to their beliefs about life, death, and the natural world. As glacial archaeologists carefully excavate such sites today, they uncover stories frozen in exquisite detail. A child's footprint preserved in compacted snow, a piece of leather still supple, a carved tool lying where it was dropped centuries ago. Each find is like hearing a whisper through the walls, faint but clear enough to remind us that behind the scientific facts are real people who laughed, feared, dreamed, and endured. The deeper we venture into their world, the more the line between past and present begins to blur. The ice seems to hold not just artifacts, but memories. If you close your eyes, you might almost believe you can feel their presence moving through these tunnels. The brush of a fur cloak passing by, the quiet rustle of someone setting down a basket of gathered moss, the distant crackle of a fire that no longer burns. And as the glacier slowly shifted and reshaped itself over centuries, these human traces remained, caught within its frozen grasp. The ice became their storyteller. Long after their voices fell silent, it remembered. Soft, echoing drip of water begins, rhythmic and steady. When we think of ancient civilizations, our minds often jump to stone ruins beneath the sun, grand temples and cities. But here, in the cold, something else unfolded. A quieter, more fragile kind of existence, not less significant, just less visible. These were people of the ice, whose legacy slept beneath layers of frost. As we move further into this story, the caves around us feel less like natural formations and more like the corridors of an ancient, forgotten world. A world where survival was an art and every action echoed for centuries. And as we linger here, in the quiet heart of the cave, there's something almost hypnotic about the way the air moves. It isn't still, not entirely. There's a slow, curling current, a breath that belongs to the ice itself. It brushes against the skin in waves, cool and feather-light, as though the cave is exhaling after centuries of silence. If you stand very still and close your eyes, you might imagine that you can hear the ice thinking, not in words, but in a language made of shifting weight, tiny movements, microscopic cracks, a language older than any we've ever spoken. The walls themselves seem to hum. It's not a sound you hear with your ears. It's one you feel just behind the chest, a deep, resonant hush, like standing inside a seashell, listening to the ocean trapped within. Some explorers have described a strange sense of being watched, but not in a frightening way, more like being witnessed, as though the glacier is curious, gently observing. The sensation is subtle, like the way a cat might quietly watch from the corner of a room, present but undemanding. And when you open your eyes again, the icy walls shimmer softly, reflecting the faint light like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Each droplet, each curve, each line of frozen time seems to whisper, "Look closer. There's more." The past here doesn't sit neatly in chapters. It swirls and drifts like snow caught in the wind. Memories don't fade, they settle, layer upon layer, whisper upon whisper. A world where moments don't end, they simply become part of the cold. It's strange to think about those who lived here so long ago, how their lives, so fleeting, are now stitched into the fabric of the glacier itself. Their footsteps may have vanished, but their presence lingers like perfume in an empty room, faint but unmistakable. Perhaps on some long winter night, when the fire burned low and the wind outside howled like a chorus, they, too, listened to these same sounds. The drip of water, the sigh of the ice, the slow shifting above their heads. And perhaps they felt the same mixture of awe and smallness that we do now, a shared human heartbeat across millennia. I imagine one of them, a young woman, maybe, sitting by the fire, fingers tracing the icy wall beside her. Her breath turns to mist in the air, curling upward like smoke. She hums a tune her mother taught her, something soft and circular, like a lullaby meant to keep the night at bay. Her voice drifts down the tunnel, echoing against the smooth walls, carrying farther than she intends. Somewhere deeper in the cave, the echo returns to her, faint but clear. It's as if the cave has learned the song and sings it back. These moments, tiny, quiet, they're what stay frozen here, not just the tools or the charcoal or the bones, but the feeling of being alive inside the ice, the warmth of breath against cold air, the shared glance between two people wrapped in furs, the way firelight glitters on a wall and makes everything seem possible. And the more you picture it, the less the past feels distant. It's not a story you're observing anymore. It's a place you're standing inside of, a story that gently folds itself around you like a thick winter blanket. The echoes here are not linear. They don't move from then to now. They circle, like water swirling at the base of a frozen waterfall. They rise up, brush against the present, and then settle again. Patient, unhurried, timeless. Sometimes I like to imagine that the glacier holds dreams, not ours, but theirs. That while their bodies slept, their thoughts drifted into the ice, caught there like fireflies in amber. And maybe, as the centuries passed, the ice kept them safe. Tiny pockets of human wonder, frozen in place, glowing softly where no one could see. And tonight, just for a moment, we get to walk among them. If you linger here long enough, something curious happens. Your sense of time begins to melt. The cold air settles around you like a heavy quilt, pressing softly against your skin, and the rhythm of the cave becomes the rhythm of your thoughts. Drip, pause, drip, pause. Each sound marking not seconds, but something quieter, something in between seconds. The walls, translucent and blue, hold faint veins of white, delicate patterns that run through the ice like the threads in old silk. If you follow them with your eyes, they twist and curve and wander deeper into the glacier, vanishing into the dark. It's easy to imagine that those lines are pathways, not physical ones, but memory lines, conduits between ages, drawing you slowly backward into times that aren't yours. If the walls could speak, what would they say? Would they tell of long winters when the sun didn't rise, of migrations that passed overhead like shadows, of nights when wolves howled at the mouth of the cave and fires burned bright in defiance? Maybe they'd speak softly. Maybe they'd ramble the way old storytellers do, circling around their memories, repeating details not because they've forgotten, but because they love the sound of remembering. I picture the glacier as one of those storytellers, ancient, patient, never in a hurry. Its voice would not come in sentences, but in sighs and groans and slow, shifting weight. It has all the time in the world. The people who once lived here probably didn't think of themselves as living in history. They were simply living. They weren't aware that their charcoal would one day be found by curious strangers with lanterns. They weren't aware that their quiet songs would echo for thousands of years in someone's imagination. They were like us, gathering around warmth, sharing food, telling stories to pass the night. And maybe, just maybe, on nights when the fire burned low and silence fell heavy, they too let their thoughts drift aimlessly. They rambled. They mused about the stars, the ice, the way sound carries in the tunnels. They might have wondered, does the glacier hear us? Do our whispers travel through the ice and reach someone, somewhere far away, long after we're gone? In a way, they were right. Their whispers did travel, through layers of time, through water and ice and shifting earth. They reached us, faint but intact. And here we are, standing where they once stood, listening to the same drips, breathing the same chilled air. The distance between us is measured not in miles, but in breaths. If you stay quiet long enough, you might begin to feel like you're being folded into the story itself, not as a visitor, not even as a listener, but as part of the glacier's quiet remembering. And perhaps that's what these places do best. They don't simply preserve the past, they invite us into it. They slow our heartbeat, hush our thoughts, and remind us that the world has existed in silence far longer than it has in noise.
As we journey deeper into the frozen labyrinth, the story shifts. No longer are we merely wandering through echoing halls of memory. We are stepping into the lives that once unfolded here, quietly, tenderly, stubbornly, beneath ceilings of ice. It's easy to imagine these people as distant, but they were not abstractions. They woke up each day, or rather, each cycle of dim light, to the sound of dripping water, the creak of shifting walls, and the soft rustle of furs as others stirred in the gloom. There were no clocks, no sunbeams to slice through curtains. Time moved in pulses, the fire dwindling, the air cooling, the cave's rhythm marking the hours. Their mornings, if you could call them that, began slowly. A soft cough from the older ones, a child shifting in their sleep, someone stoking embers, coaxing them back to life with practiced patience. Sparks catching on dried moss, smoke curling upward in thin ribbons. The smell of it clung to the ice, faint but familiar, wrapping the chamber in a scent that felt like home. The fires they built were clever things, not raging bonfires, but small, low-burning hearths designed to radiate warmth without filling the cave with smoke. Some were built in shallow, carved-out basins in the icy floor, lined with stones collected from far beyond the glacier's reach. Those stones held heat long after the flames died down, releasing it slowly through the night, like glowing embers of the earth itself. Nearby, hides were hung, stiffened by cold, softened by hands, to form partitions. They created small pockets of privacy, in a place where sound traveled like whispers through glass. Behind those makeshift walls, families slept close together, their warmth shared beneath layers of fur. In the deep cold, the closeness of bodies was not simply affection, it was survival. Their clothing told stories too. Layers upon layers of animal skins and woven fibers, stitched with sinew, decorated with small bones or beads. Each piece was practical, but also personal. A stitched pattern might mark a family. A fur lining might indicate the skill of the hunter who caught the animal. Over time, their garments became extensions of their identity, soft armor against the biting air, crafted with care by hands that understood exactly what was needed to survive, where the world itself seemed to sleep. Food was gathered with precision and patience. Hunters traveled far from the cave during brief periods of calmer weather, tracking game across icy plains. They moved quietly, following patterns etched into their minds through generations of observation. The snow told them stories, footprints, scat, the angle of a bent branch. They read it like language. Sometimes they returned triumphant with hares, birds, or meat from larger beasts, dragged across frozen ground. Other times, they returned empty-handed, their breath clouding the air in tired silence. Inside, those who stayed behind prepared. They smoked meat, hung it near the hearths to dry, pressed berries and roots into frozen alcoves like natural pantries. The ice itself became their storage, nature's refrigerator, preserving food far longer than any summer air could. A careful hand would carve a hollow deep into the wall, line it with furs, and tuck away precious supplies for the harshest stretches, sealing it with a thin layer of snow to keep scavengers away. Even water, something most of us take for granted, had to be earned. They collected clean snow, melted it slowly in carved bowls set near warm stones, careful not to let impurities spoil it. The sound of melting snow dripping into containers was a daily symphony, gentle and reliable. Sometimes they drank it cold, sometimes warmed by the fire, passing it hand to hand like something sacred. In this strange, icy world, light was both precious and rare. Their only illumination came from the fire and occasionally from small lamps crafted of stone or bone, filled with animal fat and lit with twisted fibers. The flames were dim, flickering softly against the walls, but the ice caught that light and scattered it, magnifying it into a ghostly glow. It must have been breathtaking, the chamber bathed in a soft blue firelight, walls sparkling like frozen stars. Children might have traced shapes in those flickers, seeing spirits, animals, or ancestors dancing in the gleam. And there were sounds, subtle, constant, alive. The cave was never truly silent. The glacier above shifted ever so slightly, producing long, low groans that rolled through the tunnels like distant thunder. Water dripped in steady rhythms, echoing down corridors. A gust of wind might thread its way through a narrow gap, producing a soft, eerie whistle. These sounds became as familiar to them as birdsong is to us. They were not afraid of it. It was their world, singing to them. As they lived here, they learned to listen, not with frantic alertness, but with quiet attunement. A slight change in the way the ice groaned might mean a shift above. A different drip pattern might signal a new opening forming somewhere. The glacier spoke in its own way, and they had learned its language. This was not passive living. It was a dance, subtle, daily, between humans and their frozen home. Their children grew up with this rhythm woven into their bones, their first steps taken not on grassy fields, but on smoothed ice and compacted snow, their lullabies sung in the glow of fat lamps, echoing gently against the walls. Imagine a small child tracing their hand against a glistening wall, watching their reflection ripple as light flickers through the ice. Imagine their laughter echoing down tunnels, mingling with the eternal drip of meltwater. A brief, joyful sound carried deep into the glacier's heart. As seasons passed, their relationship with the cave deepened. They began to carve shallow niches in the walls, not just for storage, but for decoration. A carefully arranged bone, a pattern etched with a sharp tool, a feather tucked into a crack. Small, almost invisible acts of claiming the space, of saying, "This cold place is ours," not conquered, not tamed, but embraced. When storms raged outside, walls of snow, howling winds, temperatures that could turn skin to frostbite in moments, the caves became sanctuaries. They'd gather closer to the fire, layers pulled tight, hands held out toward the warmth. The sound of the storm outside would filter in faintly, like a wild animal pacing at the door. But inside, there was a strange peace, a stillness that came from knowing that for now they were safe. And in those moments of calm, when bellies were full and fires burned steady, they told stories. Stories of their ancestors, stories of creatures beneath the ice, myths of great spirits who carved the tunnels with their frozen breath. Some of these stories were probably practical, ways to pass on knowledge of dangers or hunting techniques, but others were likely poetic, fantastical, rambling tales passed down just for the joy of imagining something bigger than themselves. In their voices, the cave transformed again. It became not just shelter, but a stage for imagination. Shadows cast by firelight danced on the walls, becoming bears, gods, mountains. The lines between reality and myth blurred as easily as smoke rising into the air. Life here was not easy, but it was full of quiet rituals, whispered songs, shared warmth, and slow, deliberate adaptation. Everything they did carried a sense of intention, born from necessity, but shaped by love for the fragile spark of life they protected together. And when you picture it, not as a history, but as a moment, it feels alive, doesn't it? You can almost smell the smoke, hear the faint rustle of furs, see the way firelight flickers in the eyes of someone staring into the shadows, lost in thought. It's easy to imagine falling asleep there, listening to the wind above and the steady breathing of others nearby, wrapped in warmth, while the world outside freezes over, a heartbeat inside a heart of ice. As night settled over the frozen world outside, the cave would take on a different personality. In the dimness, the shimmering walls no longer seemed solid. They became liquid, almost alive. Firelight slid across their surfaces like glowing water, pooling in curves, stretching over ridges. Shadows grew tall and thin, bending with the flicker of each flame, giving the illusion that the cave itself was gently shifting, inching closer, listening. This was the time when the rhythm of life slowed down, not because there was less to do, but because everything softened. Voices lowered, movements quieted. The world outside howled, but inside, the air grew heavy with shared warmth. The cave became less of a shelter and more of a womb, ancient, holding its people like a heartbeat holds silence between beats. In one corner, a group might sit, carefully repairing tools by lamplight. A hunter sharpening a stone edge, testing its bite against his thumb. A weaver mending a tear in thick fur, fingers moving steadily despite the cold. The light caught on the tools, small glints in the blue gloom, each spark a reminder of the countless repetitions that had shaped these objects into extensions of human will. Nearby, someone might be preparing sinew thread, pulling it through their hands to make it pliable, winding it into neat loops that hung from carved bone hooks embedded in the ice. These were small acts, almost invisible to history, but they were the threads that held their entire world together. Further back, someone else might hum softly. Not for performance, not even for others, just a quiet, tuneless hum, the kind that arises when hands are busy and hearts are settled. The sound mingles with the dripping water and faint whistle of wind, creating a kind of accidental music. If you listened long enough, you might believe the cave was joining in, offering harmony through its own echoes. And then there were the children, little clusters of warmth, tucked against fur blankets, their cheeks flushed pink from the fire's heat, eyes heavy with sleep. Some fought it, whispering to each other through half-closed eyes, spinning stories of spirits and animals that roamed outside. Others gave in fully, their breathing falling into the steady rhythm of rest. A few would press their hands against the icy wall before drifting off, feeling its coolness like a secret, as if saying goodnight to the glacier itself. Their sleep was a shared ritual. In a place where darkness stretched endlessly, rest was survival. Fires were banked carefully, embers tucked under ash to keep them alive until morning. Whoever kept watch sat close, wrapped in furs, occasionally feeding the flames, occasionally listening to the ice. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of presence. It was the kind of quiet that holds you, not isolates you. Outside, the wind might rise suddenly, a distant roar that rolled down the mountainside and rattled at the cave's entrance. Snow would pile against the opening, sealing them in, and still they would sleep, trusting the walls around them. The cave was not just stone and ice, it was their guardian, their night sky, their roof and floor and shield. During milder days, when the storms paused, small expeditions would sometimes set out to check traps or scout the nearby landscape. The world outside was stark and endless, a canvas of white stretching beneath a heavy sky. Their footsteps would crunch against snow that had hardened overnight, and their breath would trail behind them like smoke from a lantern. Some traveled alone, moving swiftly and silently. Others went in pairs, each step measured, their knowledge of the terrain passed down through countless quiet lessons rather than maps. They understood the ice. They knew where hidden crevasses lay, even when buried by snow. They could read the faint ridges and dips like we read lines on a palm. It wasn't luck that kept them alive. It was familiarity, learned slowly, patiently, through winters that would have broken the unprepared. And when they returned to the cave, cheeks flushed, hands stiff, lungs filled with cold air, they'd be greeted not with fanfare, but with gentle nods, quiet gestures. A shared glance was enough to say, "You made it back. You belong here." Sometimes they'd bring back small treasures, a piece of wood carried from afar to feed the fire, a strip of meat, a feather caught in a drift. Each item had value, not just for its use, but because it tied the outside world to the inside one. The cave was their world, but it was never their prison. It was part of a rhythm, a back and forth between exposure and refuge. Within these icy chambers, rituals formed naturally. A particular rock near the entrance where they'd leave offerings, a sliver of meat, a feather, a bead. Maybe it was superstition, maybe it was gratitude, or maybe deep down they believed the glacier was listening, that it had moods, that it could be pleased or angered. In such an environment, where human survival hung by a thread, it would have been impossible not to see the ice as alive. And in a way, it was. The glacier shifted, breathed, whispered. It cracked and groaned at night like a giant turning in its sleep. They didn't conquer it. They coexisted with it, quietly, humbly, as one lives with something vast and sacred. Sometimes, late at night, someone might wander alone through one of the narrower tunnels, carrying only a dim lamp. The light would catch on crystalline walls, making them sparkle like stars trapped in glass. Every step would echo, every breath would sound impossibly loud, and in that solitude, they might speak softly, not to another person, but to the cave itself. A question, a prayer, a confession. The ice always answered the same way, with silence, with patience, with its ancient, steady presence. These are the moments that don't make it into history books. There are no records of these conversations, no artifacts to mark a soft hum in the dark. And yet, it's easy to imagine them because they're human moments, timeless ones, the kind that still happen today when someone sits alone late at night and lets their mind drift into the quiet. Here, surrounded by walls that have witnessed centuries, their lives were both fragile and monumental. Each day was an act of endurance. Each night, a ceremony of trust. Every tool repaired, every meal shared, every laugh muffled into the fur of a cloak. It all wove together into a tapestry that the glacier cradled and preserved. And as we wander through their routines, their rituals, their quiet conversations with the ice, it's hard not to feel as though their breath still lingers here, as though the cave remembers exactly where they sat, how they sang, how they waited for morning. There's something tender about imagining how people cared for each other in a place like this. In a world where the line between survival and danger was as thin as a sheet of ice, connection wasn't optional. It was woven into every gesture, every shared glance. Their lives were quiet, yes, but not cold. When someone grew sick, the entire rhythm of the group shifted. Fires were stoked a little longer. Water was warmed more carefully. Those who could hunt brought back the richest cuts. Those who could weave or sew brought furs closer, tucking them gently around the weakened body. Illness here wasn't treated with distant efficiency. It was met with a soft vigilance, a communal holding of breath, as if the whole group leaned inward to keep that person tethered to life. They didn't have medicine in the way we think of it, but they had warmth and time and an understanding that a single life was part of the group's heartbeat. Someone's recovery meant everyone breathed easier again, and when someone passed, their absence left a silence that the cave itself seemed to notice. It said that in certain icy burials found near ancient glacier edges, bodies were wrapped not hastily, but carefully, layers of fur arranged with intention, personal items tucked in beside them, a carved bone, a small stone, perhaps a charm, perhaps a memory. These gestures weren't just practical, they were emotional. In their own quiet way, they were saying, "You mattered." And in the nights that followed such a loss, I imagine the cave felt a little different. The echoes stretched a little longer. The fires crackled softer. People huddled closer, listening not just to the ice, but to each other's breathing, reassured by the simple fact of presence. Seasons in the glacier world were subtle, but felt. Winter, if you can call it that, was the long, deep stretch of darkness when the outside world became merciless. But there were transitions. The sound of wind would shift slightly as snow packed heavier against the entrance. The dripping inside the cave might quicken when distant ice layers warmed, signaling the whisper of a distant thaw. These tiny changes became their calendar, not dates marked on parchment, but rhythms marked in the ear, the skin, the bones. During what we might call early spring, when the outside began to soften just enough, small rituals would take place. Families might gather near the entrance, clearing snow slowly, letting the pale light filter in for the first time after weeks of dimness. Imagine that moment, stepping out into a world still white, but somehow gentler, the sun catching on fresh snow like scattered diamonds, breathing air that carried a different scent. Still cold, but with the faintest hint of change. That first step outside wasn't just practical, it was ceremonial. A whisper to the glacier, "Thank you for holding us." As warmer periods came, though warmth was always relative, there was more movement. Small groups might venture farther. New traps set. Water collected from melt streams instead of chipped from walls. Children played near the entrance, carefully watched, their laughter bouncing into the tunnels like bright birds. They would press their hands into wet snow, watching it cling to their skin before melting away. These were their seasons of breathing out, of stretching limbs after long stillness. And during these times, love, quiet and unspoken, found its ways too. There might have been couples who met by shared tasks, fetching water, mending hides, standing side by side during hunts. There were no grand declarations beneath the ice. Affection was felt in action, a piece of fur shared without asking, a lamp lit for someone who returned late, a touch of hands in the dark, brief, warm, steady. In the language of the cave, where words were precious and echoes carried everything, love whispered rather than shouted. Elders, too, held their place with quiet gravity. Their memories were libraries. They remembered which tunnel walls had cracked in winters past, which ridges outside hid sudden drops, which plants buried beneath snow could be dug up come thaw. When they spoke, others listened, not because they commanded, but because they knew. Their voices, lower and slower, blended with the cave's hum, as if the glacier itself approved their words. I imagine a scene. An elder sitting near the fire, wrapped in layers of furs, their face carved by time and cold, eyes gleaming in the flicker. Around them, children huddle, sleepy but spellbound. The elder speaks slowly, maybe not telling a linear story, but rambling softly, looping through half-remembered myths and real memories intertwined. A bear that walked like a man, a star that fell and carved a tunnel. The winter where the snow never stopped. Their voice drifts, rises, falls, like the wind itself. Some children doze off mid-story, heads resting on furs. Others stare at the ice ceiling, trying to picture the impossible. This is how knowledge lived here, not in scrolls or ink, but in soft voices at the end of long days. And as these voices faded into sleep, the cave held it all. Every sound, every breath, folded neatly into its frozen chambers like letters stored in secret drawers. Even now, if you imagine it closely enough, it feels as though those voices are still there, faint, blended with the drips, the distant groans of shifting ice, the low wind humming through narrow passages. Not gone, just resting. As centuries unfolded in silence, the stories these people told didn't vanish. They clung to the ice. They drifted down the tunnels like faint smoke, winding their way through time. Myths grew out of daily rhythms, transforming familiar sounds into something vast and sacred. Imagine a child, lying awake deep in the cave, listening to the long, low groan of the glacier shifting above. To them, it wasn't just ice moving. It was a great sleeping spirit, rolling in its slumber. Some said the glacier was alive, that it dreamed beneath the surface, and that humans were simply guests in its home. They believed that if you listened closely at night, you could hear its heartbeat, slow, patient, older than mountains. There were tales of creatures that lived within the ice, not monsters in the way we tell stories now, not fanged, not cruel, but watchers, silent figures who moved through the tunnels unseen, appearing only in flickers of light at the edge of vision. Some said they were the spirits of ancestors, keeping watch. Others said they were the glacier's own children, born from frost, who guided travelers and whispered warnings through sudden changes in wind. The drip of water was said to be their language, each drip, each echo, a syllable in a conversation too slow for humans to fully understand. Elders would sit quietly, head tilted toward a wall, listening to the spirits, they'd say. Maybe it was their way of attuning to the cave. Maybe it was simply their way of remembering. Firelight played a part too. In the shimmering glow, shapes appeared. Sometimes these shapes were just shadows, bending with the flame. But other times, people believed they saw stories being told by the ice itself. The way light refracted through a crack might form the outline of a bear mid-stride. Another night, it might look like a woman cloaked in snow, watching over the sleepers. These weren't coincidences to them. These were signs, messages, comforts. In the heart of winter, when the world outside became nearly unreachable, the myths blossomed brightest. The cave became not just shelter, but a world entire, complete with gods, spirits, guardians, and secrets. It was a living storybook, one where the walls were the pages and the people were both readers and writers. And then the centuries turned. The glacier kept its slow, indifferent rhythm. Generations came and went. The fires were lit, then extinguished. The footsteps faded. Eventually, the voices fell silent. But the ice remembered. Deep within its layers, it held their echoes. Charcoal locked in crystal-clear walls, tools suspended in perfect preservation, bones wrapped in fur as if sleeping. These were their whispers, tucked away where time itself moves differently. Many ages later, explorers stumbled upon these hidden chambers. Scientists, archaeologists, wanderers with lanterns in hand, stepping cautiously into the blue glow. They felt what you and I have felt walking through these tunnels in our minds, that strange sensation of being seen by the past. They found charcoal from ancient fires, perfectly black against the blue. They found tools, still sharp, still bearing the marks of hands that shaped them long ago. They found burial sites, so well preserved that even the stitching on fur wrappings was intact. Each discovery wasn't just an artifact, it was a moment frozen mid-breath, waiting patiently to be noticed again. In recent decades, scientists have begun to study the ice itself as if it were a living archive. By drilling deep into glaciers, they've extracted cores that read like history books, rings of snow that record volcanic eruptions, migrations, atmospheric changes. Hidden inside some layers are traces of smoke and ash from ancient fires, faint fingerprints of those who once made their homes here. Their existence, once invisible, now speaks softly through data and ice crystals. It's a strange kind of reunion. Modern hands holding the memories of ancient ones, separated by millennia, brought together by frozen time. And yet, even with our science, our measurements, our maps, the caves still keep secrets. There are chambers no one has explored, tunnels too unstable to reach, whispers too faint to translate. Some part of these frozen worlds remains theirs alone, a private language between the glacier and the souls who once lived within it. Now, as our journey through the ice comes to its close, imagine the fires burning low. The people we've followed are drifting to sleep, their breaths mingling with the cave's soft sighs. Outside, the wind quiets. Snow falls silently, layer upon layer, sealing them in a cocoon of cold and stillness. The cave hums, not with drama, but with patience. It has all the time in the world. Somewhere in that frozen night, a child rolls over, pulling a fur closer, pressing their cheek against a wall of glowing ice. Their eyelids flutter, their breathing slows. The drip of water lulls them, steady and sure. And in that moment, fleeting but infinite, human warmth and ancient cold exist in perfect harmony. Centuries pass, and still that moment lingers here. If you listen closely, even now, the glacier still speaks, not with urgency, but with patience. The way a river hums beneath ice in winter, or the way old trees murmur in wind that's been traveling for miles. It has never hurried, it has never needed to. Somewhere out there, in some forgotten corner of the world, the caves still exist. Their entrances may be hidden under fresh snow, their tunnels reshaped by centuries of slow movement, but they're there, waiting, breathing in their own frozen rhythm. Their walls still glow with that quiet blue light that no lantern can truly replicate. Their chambers still hold the same stillness that generations once called home. And if you were to stand at the mouth of one of those caves now, just as the night gives way to a pale, wintry dawn, you'd see something extraordinary. The sky would be soft and colorless, the kind of early morning that doesn't announce itself with fanfare. Your breath would hang in the air, curling upward like thin smoke. The snow beneath your feet would groan faintly with each step, and the world around you would feel untouched, as if centuries have folded inward and placed you gently inside their pages. If you stepped inside, slowly, lamp in hand, the light would spill across the ice like honey sliding over glass. The walls would catch it, bend it, scatter it in unexpected ways. You might see something that isn't really there, or maybe something that always has been, a shadow that resembles a figure leaning just around the corner, a ripple of blue that looks almost like eyes, a pattern in the frost that forms the outline of a creature mid-step. You'd tell yourself it's just the light, just a trick, but the glacier would remain silent, holding its secrets. It doesn't need to explain itself. Deeper in, the air would change. It always does. There's a moment when the outside world disappears completely. The wind vanishes, the temperature steadies, and you realize that you've stepped out of time and into something older, slower, wiser. Your footsteps would echo, rolling softly down corridors that have carried countless sounds before yours. The ice would listen to you, as it has listened to everyone. You might kneel down to examine a small detail, a ripple in the wall, a trapped air bubble, a line of sediment frozen mid-flow, and there, in that tiny imperfection, you'd find a story. Perhaps it's the trace of smoke from a fire long gone, sealed away when the glacier shifted. Perhaps it's a single hair, caught in a layer of frost centuries ago. Perhaps it's nothing more than water frozen mid-drip. And yet, in the quiet, even the smallest thing feels significant, because here, everything lasts. These caves are not loud. They're not grand in the way of marble palaces or towering cathedrals. Their power lies in subtlety, in the way light bends, in the way sound carries, in the way time seems to hold its breath. They are temples built by the slow persistence of the world itself, places where human lives flickered for a moment and were then wrapped gently in the glacier's endless patience. And though the people are long gone, the shape of their presence remains, a shallow depression in the floor where many feet once stood, blackened marks high on the wall where smoke gathered, a carved niche holding a small stone no one would notice unless they looked closely. These are not monuments in the way we build them now. They're whispers, murmurs, evidence that life once existed, not with thunder, but with quiet endurance. In some parts of the world, explorers who have stumbled into untouched ice chambers have reported an overwhelming feeling of warmth, not physical, but emotional, as if the space recognizes them, welcomes them back, not as intruders, but as descendants of a shared human story. Perhaps it's our minds, weaving meaning from stillness, or perhaps, on some level we can't measure, the ice does remember us. When scientists remove a core sample from a glacier, they sometimes find layers of ash, soot, or pollen that match exactly with ancient human activity. It's as if the glacier has been keeping a diary, patiently recording every flicker of human presence, every breath of fire, every trace of life. We read those layers like sentences, in a language the earth has always spoken, slow, deliberate, beautiful. And I like to think that if the people who once lived here could see us now, drilling, studying, piecing together their lives with reverence, they might smile, not because we've discovered them, but because we remembered to listen. We leaned in close enough to hear their whispers through the ice. Out there, the night sharpens itself on the mountains. The wind gathers weight as it travels, picking up old scents and older stories, crossing ridgelines, slipping through the teeth of stone, pulling at snowfields until drifts rise and float like pale ghosts. It's the kind of wind that doesn't simply pass by. It arrives, deliberate and attentive, searching for every gap, every seam, every small invitation to enter. It touches the glacier first, the outer skin of blue-white that faces the wide, star-pale sky. The surface tightens at the wind's approach, the way skin tightens when a cold hand rests upon it. The first breath of it is thin and surgical, a cool needle sliding under a door. Then another breath, then another. And soon the gusts layer themselves like blankets made of glass, one on top of another, until the entire world outside sounds like a choir of invisible ribbons pulled taut and humming. If you stood at the mouth of the cave, you would hear the wind before you felt it. You'd hear it thread itself through the broken teeth of rock, hear it lengthen along the tunnel's lip, hear it vibrate in tones that shift with the smallest change in angle. One step forward, and the note drops lower, a dark flute. One step back, and it climbs higher, a wire pulled tight. The music of the cold is precise, and it tests you, asks how close you dare come. Then it finds your face. Not brutal at first, curious. A clean finger pressed to your cheek. A cool question against your eyelids, asking if you're truly awake. But the wind has distance inside it, and the distance has teeth. It carries the miles it traveled in its ribs, the night it gathered in its lungs. It unfurls them now, and while you watch the darkness move, you feel the cold lay its map upon your skin. The brow, the nose, the lips, the hollow, where the breath hesitates. Pull back, step inside, just a pace or two. Enough for the mouth of the cave to take you in. Enough for the ice to say, "Hush now," and feel the difference. Inside, the air is old in a comforting way, aged like a story told around many fires. It holds its temperature the way a lighthouse holds its light, steady, not warm like summer, not generous like spring, but constant, a promise kept through the worst of it. The wind thins at the threshold, grows shy among the walls, becomes whisper instead of blade. It licks along the edges of the stone and loses interest, retreating to prowl the mouth of the cave like a restless animal that will not cross a line it does not understand. And this is where the gratitude lives, in the small differences, in the almosts and barelys and just enoughs that hold a night together. A hand spreads a hide nearer the fire. Someone nudges embers with the patience of a clockmaker, reads the color of heat like an alphabet. Another lifts a shallow bowl toward the shy flame, and the thin skin of ice upon the water surrenders, becomes a clear, wavering mirror that catches the light and throws it up against the curved ceiling. It's not warm the way summer is warm. It's warm the way a hand is warm when it cups another hand. Precise, intimate, real. Listen to the wind outside, grow confident. It scours the snow until the surface shimmers like ground glass. It gathers its own name and speaks it over and over, louder each time, until drifts are pushed against the cave's lip like bright, weightless stone. Every gust arrives with a different posture, a sweep, a shove, a long unspooling. You can almost see its shapes, how it wears itself, thin at the edges, muscular at the center, wide as the valley, quick as the thought that follows fear and becomes prayer. And then, let the eyes drift inward again. A face tilts toward the heat. A shoulder relaxes by a fraction. A wool edge is pulled across a wrist where the pulse lives. These are the small mercies. Not enough to fight the winter back to the ocean, no, but enough to keep the flame honest. Enough to make the wind for a moment someone else's concern. In places like this, gratitude is a quiet animal. It doesn't leap. It settles. It curls under the ribs and makes a nest there, feather by feather, breath by breath. It listens to the wind the way a mother listens to distant thunder, alert, but not owned by it. It knows the measure of what's inside the circle of light, and it tends that circle with deliberate hands. You can feel it in the way the furs are shared without speech, in the way a cup is passed, warm from one set of fingers to the next, lingering just long enough to say, stay, in the way someone rises to check the entrance, sees the snow piling higher, and returns with the news in their eyes, but not in their voice. The fire answers the news by burning a little steadier. Gratitude hears the report and doubles the blanket, without ceremony, without debt. The wind has hundreds of arguments it wants to make. It wants you to know what it learned on the ridge. It wants to slide under every seam, whisper to your ankles, threaten your lips with the numbness that begins like a kiss and ends like a silence you cannot bear. But the cave has one answer, and it is enough. Stay. And so you do. You sit nearer the stone that remembers the day's heat. You tuck your feet under you. You let your spine find an angle that will not punish you for resting. You watch the fire read your face, and you let your eyelids grow heavy while the wind lays out its maps outside and fails again and again to find the route to your breathing. Pause. The wind swells, a long, slow exhale across a bottle's mouth, then settles. Gratitude grows detailed in the night. It notices the way the lamp's wick looks when it's trimmed just right, how the flame becomes a small, steady coin. It admires the seam someone mended earlier in the day, the stitches neat as footprints in new snow. It loves the sound of water deciding to be warm, the tiny creaks of wood remembering the tree it belonged to, the regimented tick of melt tapping the bowl's rim, punctual as a heartbeat. There is a theology of the threshold on nights like this, the belief that the world beyond the mouth of the cave is vast and exacting, while the world within is precise and kind. Each gust outside is a sermon on distance and hunger and the long, sharp teeth of winter. Each ember inside is a psalm of enoughness. Not feast, but bread. Not summer, but sleep. Not safety forever, but safety now. And you say, grace for the now. Not aloud. Your voice would feel too loud, would wobble the air, but with your breath, with the way your hands find the cup without looking, with the way your shoulders understand the mathematics of rest and solve for quiet. Think of the doors you have known. City doors that slam against rain, house doors that squeak warnings at night, doors that boast themselves, doors that fail. The cave has no door, and yet the wind respects its architecture. Respect might not even be the word. Perhaps it is recognition. The wind, old as the mountain, sees the cave, older still, and bows its head. It can prowl the threshold. It can threaten. It can sing its cold to the stars. But the geometry here is decided. This mouth says no farther, and the winter listens. The longer you sit, the more the senses agree upon their story. The fire describes warmth in a vocabulary of orange. The stone translates that into patience. The blanket turns it into touch. Your lungs compose it into a lullaby and teach your blood to hum along. Your skin, which just an hour ago mapped the cruelty of the night like cartographers map a coast, now maps mercy instead. It finds the borders of comfort and traces them, careful as a child learning letters. And outside, always outside, the wind writes its long poem on the snow. It drafts and redrafts, crossing out its own lines with fresh drifts, scraping at the old sentences, drawing furrows and smoothing them, dissatisfied with how the valley reads the stanza. It never finishes. It doesn't want to. Its grammar is motion. Its rhyme is repetition. Its metaphor is the way a mountain makes a fist and forces the sky to go around. When the gusts hit their stride, the cave can feel like a ship at anchor. The ropes are invisible, the moorings are ice and will and the politely stubborn heat of the hearth. But you can sense the pull, how the night wants to take you somewhere you will not go. The entrance darkens, brightens, darkens again as spindrift rises and falls. In the near distance, snow grains lift from the surface and fly not upward but sideways like fish in a fast current. The whole world is a river, and you are in the one place the river cannot find. You begin to thank small things by name. Thank you, seam. Thank you, cup. Thank you, ember, that refuses to confess it is small. Thank you, stone with yesterday's sun asleep inside you. Thank you, lamp that does not judge how close I hold you to my cheek. Thank you, fur that smells like the winds of another season, when the grass was a rumor and the water ran glassy over round stones. Gratitude becomes a lamp you can carry through the rooms of yourself. You check each room. You touch the lintel. You draw the curtain closed against the winter and find that the curtain is a memory of every night you have ever survived, even the ones you thought would not end. And then, because you are human, you think of other bodies in other storms. The wanderers who miss the mouth of the cave by a dozen steps and learn the shape of cold too intimately. The shepherds who leaned their backs to stone and let the night pass through them, like a river they could not drink. The sailors who laced the wind to their masts and taught their ropes new prayers. The city sleepers in rooms too thin for January, whose breath wrote cursive on the inside of windows, please and please and please again. You do not suffer guilt for your warmth. You suffer awareness. You introduce that awareness gently to your gratitude, and they shake hands, and they agree to make room for one another by the fire. The wind finds a new register. Lower now, more patient, less a blade than a bell. It rings the mountain. It tolls the drifts. It calls the night to witness that it did its work, carved the ridge, carried the frost, taught the valley how to listen. It will continue. It always does. That is its vow, sworn on the cold breath of glaciers and the sharp teeth of stars. Inside, vows are quieter. No oaths, no declarations, just the slow, experienced promise of caretaking. I will feed this flame when it thins. I will turn this stone when it cools. I will lift the blanket higher when your foot forgets it belongs to you. I will listen when your sleep wavers, and I will tell the wind to go sing somewhere else. It obeys you because you have learned the language of enough. A long, drowsy silence. Only the pulse of low wind, the tick of melt, the soft crumble of an ember shifting its weight. By and by, the body admits that it is loved. It stops bracing. It stops negotiating with the cold that is not here. It remembers how to let the spine be a riverbed, and the breath be water, and the mind be a sky with no weather in it at all. The eyelids discover their favorite part of the dark. The hands choose a place to be. I will be here near the cup. You will be there, under the blanket. And they keep their promise without effort. Outside, the wind writes its final drafts for the night. It underlines a cornice. It edits the slope. It leaves a white paragraph at the entrance, neat and quiet, that will blush blue when the morning light tests it. It signs its name with a flourish, a single sweeping gust that startles even the trees into attention, and then it goes about the business of being everywhere else. If you were to rise now, if you were to part the blankets and stand where the cave meets the world, you would see the night bowing to the idea of morning. The stars are dim behind thin veils. The snow hears something and shifts its weight. The wind sets down its instruments and cleans them, polite after the concert. Your breath, warm and living, would curl out into this reconciled air and return to you as comfort instead of one of winter's arguments. But you do not rise, not yet. The honest gratitude is not in the gesture of braving what roams the dark. It is in the permission you give yourself to stay, to let the warmth be correct, to let the cave be wise, to let the wind tell its stories to the mountain, while you honor a smaller, truer story, that a human body slept and was kept, and woke again to tell the tale. In the morning, the entrance will be dressed in new snow. A blue light will seep through it, as if the sky were melted sapphire, poured into a shallow bowl. The wind will be elsewhere, tutoring another valley in the grammar of winter. You'll touch the stone and find that it is cool but not cold, loyal even in its quiet. The cup will be empty, but it will remember warmth. The blanket will be a landscape of sleep you crossed in the night and forgot in the best way. And you will know, without lecture, without spectacle, that last night was a ceremony. The wind officiated. The cave bore witness. The fire kept the minutes. And gratitude was the guest of honor who spoke last, said almost nothing, and was heard by every wall. The night is cold enough to ring like metal. It folds itself around the valley, tucks the ridgelines in, and irons the sky until even the stars look brittle. You can hear the storm organizing in the distance, gathering its chords, testing its voice. It rehearses on the far slope, then carries its rehearsal across the snowfields until the notes collect at the cave mouth and lean in like curious, frost-bitten listeners. Inside, the first answer is always together. A shoulder touches a shoulder. A knee finds a knee. Someone draws a blanket edge over two hands instead of one. The fire is small, on purpose, always on purpose, but the circle is big, made not of stone or law, but bodies that refuse to let the cold sit between them. They close ranks the way birds fold into formation in a hard wind, the way seals pack tight against black water. Not ceremony, instinct. The oldest mathematics we know, many small warmths becoming a climate. Listen, how the cave hushes when people lean closer. Fabric sighs, leather murmurs, a small cough, quickly tamed. The fire reads the room and steadies. Heat moves through the air, like a rumor made kindly true. A bowl passes from hand to hand, and with each hand, the bowl seems warmer, because warmth grows by being shared. Outside, the storm pitches its argument. Distance, distance, distance. It lectures in gusts. It writes long essays across the snow, scoring each line with a sharp quill of ice. It insists that every creature is alone in the dark, that every breath must fend for itself. But the cave does not argue. The cave demonstrates a simple proof, one back against another back, and already the cold is less clever. Someone begins the quiet work of arranging warmth, a tender logistics, thicker furs toward the outer arc, thinner near the fire, small bodies at the center, where the heat pools, elders tucked, where the stone still remembers the day. A hand tests a forehead. No words, just the arithmetic of care. Another hand mends the lamp wick, fingers shining faint with oil. And when the flame finds the wick again, it stands taller, as if grateful to be useful. They sleep in constellations, pairs and trios, and gentle lines, faces to shoulders, breath to hair, a slow braid of heat that runs through the group like a hidden river. The little ones wriggle until their cold feet locate a friendlier landscape, and then they go still, dreaming of sun cups and blue shards and the way snow sighs when you lie down in it. An elder shifts, and the entire circle adjusts by instinct, like a school of fish correcting for a current. The movement so soft you can't say when it began or ended, only that it happened together. And the body, stubborn at first, remembers. It stops bracing. It stops auditioning for the wind's attention. It accepts the diplomatic mission of shared heat. The back warms the chest behind it. The chest warms the hands tucked under its edge. The hands return the favor by holding the blanket in a way that keeps the promise of warmth unbroken. There is a job for everyone on a night like this. Not the noisy jobs of noon, but the night crafts. The ember turner whose patience keeps the fire in the narrow lane between too little and too much. The watcher at the mouth, listening to the snow's new grammar and translating it into small nods. The waterkeeper, turning ice into kindness a cup at a time. The storyteller, whose voice does not rise above the breath of the lamp, weaving threads of sound that stitch all the bodies into one quilt. Even silence works. It labors invisibly, like a loom that hums without calling attention to its threads. Silence gathers the heat. Silence convinces the heart to beat a little slower, spend fewer coins of warmth. Silence says, the storm has its business. We have ours. Outside, the wind remembers cliffs and sharp corners, and the exact address of every gap between rocks. It pours itself into those gaps, plays them like flutes, lays snow like fresh paper, tears it up, and lays it again. It is tireless. It is excellent at its work. But when it comes to the cave, it can only announce itself. It cannot enter the ceremony of warmth. The threshold keeps its vow. Unity has a physics you can feel in your bones. You feel it when someone adjusts the blanket and the warmth does not leak. When a palm presses lightly between your shoulder blades and your ribs, understand that they are not a fence. They are a door. When the circle inhales together, one long, unplanned tide, and the air itself seems to change its mind about the night. A song begins, not bold, not even whole, a thread of melody carried by a voice that knows the cave's echo is a generous partner. Another voice picks up the thread, not harmony, not yet, just company. Then a third finds a place that isn't either voice, but lives kindly between them. The lamp flame sways, pleased by the agreement. The wind hears the song as shape, not content. It notes the shape and rewrites its sentence outside. The song is not for the wind. The song is for the circle that keeps the lamp taut, and the lamp keeps the song warm. And if you are awake in such a circle, if your eyes are heavy but open, you witness the exchange. How the stronger shoulders borrow cold from the weaker ones and pay it back as heat. How the tired hands are allowed to be useless for a while because usefulness is a rotating task, not a permanent assignment. How hunger is postponed by the simple architecture of bodies agreeing to stay. There are moments when the storm knocks like a rude guest. A sudden thump against the drift at the entrance, a handful of snow rattling down the rock, a gust that speaks in one long, low vowel. The watcher looks up. The circle tightens by a breath. The ember turner leans forward as if to say, "We heard you." The storm continues its letter. The circle returns to its paragraph about warmth. Both texts are true. Only one is home. Imagine a child waking in that half-sleep where the mind carries its lantern low. They feel the cold at the edge of the blanket like a question. Before the question becomes worry, a hand arrives, an elder's perhaps, and smooths the blanket's edge until it seals. No words. No, "Are you all right?" Just a seam mended so quietly the child thinks maybe the blanket fixed itself. The child returns to a dream of summer water. The elder returns to the long, dignified work of being a wall that breathes. The storm escalates. It braids 3 winds into one rope and swings it across the mouth of the cave. Snow leaps, ice hisses. Far away, a ridge complains, in a voice like torn parchment. Here, the watcher lifts a palm, listening. The palm says it is loud. The palm says it is fine. The circle trusts the palm. Trust is the warmest furniture. Someone tells a story, and it is not about heroics. It is about a day when a snare gave up a little meat. About a bowl that did not crack in the sudden cold. About a laugh that surprised itself and made the lamp flirt with the air. The story is small on purpose. It keeps everyone inside the room of now. It says, we have enough moments to remember without borrowing the wind's biography. The night grows old. It smells different when it does. Less metal, more wool. The wind keeps its appointments, but the gusts lengthen until they sound like sighs. Sighs become rests. Rests become a music that the heart can sleep through. Even the mountain stops gnashing its cliff teeth and leans back into its own outline. This is when unity becomes temperature. You can measure it with your cheek against a sleeve. You can measure it with the water that stays warm enough to be kind to a throat. You can measure it with how long a hand can linger outside the blanket to tend the fire without bargaining with pain. If a stranger walked in, they would understand before any introduction that the warmth here is built by consensus. Every back votes yes. And unity is not only bodies, it is tasks braided together. The ember turner nods to the watcher. The watcher nods to the waterkeeper. The waterkeeper nods to the storyteller. The storyteller nods to the sleepers. The sleepers in the most generous economy, pay all of them by sleeping deeply enough to make the work worth doing. No coins, no ledger, just heat, moving around the circle like a moon. If you could pull the night back like a curtain and see the scene from above, you'd notice how the heat pools. Not a perfect circle, humans are not perfect circles, but an oval that fattens where two shoulders tuck, that narrows where a stone keeps its cool dignity, that blushes brighter where a child sleeps beneath two blankets instead of one. You'd notice, too, how the cold lingers near the walls and decides not to interfere because it recognizes the boundary. Even the cold respects a well-made agreement. Outside, the storm writes its final chapters in white ink on white paper. It underlines the cornice. It crosses out the ridgeline and replaces it with the same ridgeline because the first version was already right. It signs its name in a flourish that no one will see until morning, then takes a bow to the tree line and wanders off to find another audience. Inside, a quiet audit. The ember bed, healthy. The water, softly warm. The lamp, behaving like a modest star. The blankets, heavy where they should be, light where they must be. The people, countable by breath, not by worry. Someone loosens their hands, and in loosening, lends warmth to the ones beside them. Someone else dreams of grass, another dreams of light on a pond, another dreams of a story told in a voice so low it is almost an extra blanket. The cave holds all of it the way cupped hands hold a bird, steady, a little awed, unwilling to let go until the air is gentle enough. Morning, when it comes, does not arrive like an army. It comes like a secret that the snow can't keep.
The mouth of the cave glows faint blue, and that blue climbs the walls slowly until it becomes a pale, friendly grey. The watcher rises without stiffness. The ember turner turns the last ember and smiles at how faithful small things can be. The water keeper pours what remains into a bowl, and the bowl steams just enough to say yes. The storyteller coughs once and stretches their hands toward the new day's version of light. Unity stands up with the people. It doesn't dissolve when the wind relents. It translates itself. Now it is the dividing of tasks for the thaw. Now it is the kindness of letting the tired one sleep 20 breaths longer. Now it is the eye that checks the drift's edge so a child's foot will not punch through. The night is over, but the covenant is not. The night only proved what the day will practice. And as they step toward the entrance, slowly, still, together, you can feel the gratitude like extra cloth in a pocket. It does not weigh them down. It makes the pocket warm. They look at the paragraph the storm left at the threshold, a neat block of blue-white, and they read it with their boots. The cave takes a last inventory of breaths, nods, and lets them pass. The valley is clean. The wind has tidied its instruments. Every tree holds a new lesson in stillness. Every stone wears a white thought it didn't think yesterday. And you understand, as surely as you feel the blood in your wrists, that the reason the night was gentle in the end is not that the storm was weak. It was that togetherness is strong, not loud, not theatrical, not looking for applause, just practiced, precise, the art of many small heats, deciding to be one fire. So if you are listening in your own night, with your own wind arguing outside the windows, let this be your blanket. You are part of a circle, seen or unseen, that keeps a lamp for you. The warmth grows by being shared. The story stays kind by being told around many shoulders. And the morning, when it comes, will find you among others who kept the watch, who turned the embers, who sang the low song that made the air remember how to be a home. The night does not end in a single motion. It loosens, thread by thread, until the fabric becomes soft enough to fold. Listen to what lingers when the wind steps back to count the mountains. There's the measured tick of melt against the rim of a shallow bowl, polite and punctual, the way a heart keeps time even through a dream. There's the ember's tiny grammar, crackle, sigh, settle, as if every orange fleck were a word for stay. There's the hush that lives between breaths when people sleep near one another, not silence exactly, but a woven quiet, as if the cave had learned their names and now recites them gently to itself. We think of night as darkness, but here it is a texture. It's the weight of blankets that remember shoulders. It's the nap of fur that knows the map of a cheekbone. It's the soft indentation in the stone where a back discovered the one angle that asks for nothing in return. Drift a little closer to the lamp. Notice how its light behaves. It does not rush. It persuades. It lays a calm coin on the floor, pours a pale ribbon along the curve of the wall, and finds the faces of the sleepers with such care that even a closed eyelid looks like a promise kept. In that light, even tools seem to rest. The knife is just a sleeping crescent. The bowl is a quiet moon with a warm smell. The threaded bone needle is a constellation in a straight line, crossing from work into mercy and back again. Out beyond the entrance, the storm is revising its essay into footnotes. A gust here to clarify a ridge, a hush there to let the trees speak. The valley accepts the edits. The snow agrees to hold still for a while, a blank page that will welcome morning's handwriting without complaint. Inside, memory begins to sit up. It doesn't hurry. It stretches its long arms over seasons, touches yesterday's fire and last year's winter at the same time, and then opens its fist to show you small, glowing things. A laugh that surprised itself and became a lamp's favorite echo. A seam mended while two voices hummed, not a song, but a shape. A bowl that did not crack in the sudden cold. How low everyone spoke to it afterward, as if not to startle the good luck away. Memory is careful with its light too. It doesn't blind, it guides. It shows you the thread of every night that has ended kindly, knots them at the center, and ties that knot near your heart so you won't forget how to find your way when the wind rehearses its old arguments again. You could count blessings here, but it would feel like a counting in a cathedral. Better to name textures, the exact softness where two blankets overlap, and invent a new, better blanket. The temperature of water when it has forgotten ice but not yet learned to steam. The weight of a palm on a shoulder. A promise weighed and found sufficient. A murmur stirs near the circle. Not speech, something like the idea of speech, remembering how to be a voice. The ember turner turns, a practiced half-breath, a patient half-motion. The watcher at the mouth tilts their head and receives the valley's latest sentence. I am done with the night's loudness. I will keep only the lessons. There is a ceremony here that no one invented. You can see it if you look at the bodies like a cartographer looks at rivers. The warmth pools where the little ones have nested overflows down the slope of knees, braids around ankles, collects again along the border where the stone begins. The current is slow and generous. It does not forget anyone. It mends the small gaps the way roots mend soil after spring floods. And because your mind is not a clock but a meadow, a reverie walks across it on quiet feet. You picture summer water holding light like a secret. You picture grass agreeing with the wind instead of wrestling it. You picture the sky when it has put away its knives and chosen a spoon. The ember answers by lifting a faint plume that smells like patience. The cave answers by not answering, by being itself so completely that you stop auditioning for any other world. The word for this is not surrender. The word is belonging. Pause here. Let the breath fall into its own cadence, unrushed. Feel how the air in the lungs chooses the long path out, the path that teaches the ribs to open like doors in a house that trusts its hinges. If there is a prayer tonight, it does not ask, it thanks. Thank you, seam that held. Thank you, bone that bent but did not break. Thank you, fire that refused both pride and panic. Thank you, hands that remembered gentleness even after long work. Thank you, cave, for keeping the alphabet of warmth where we could read it. Outside, the sky prepares a small rehearsal for dawn. Nothing public, just the faintest drift of pale behind the thought of mountains. The wind, now a librarian again, shelves its volumes of cold on the high ridges and steps lightly down the stacks, touching each spine with a finger that no longer stings. Inside, a whisper moves through the sleepers like a tide that is also a hand smoothing a sheet. One person turns, another answers with a small adjustment. The blanket seals without speaking. The song of togetherness, invisible, unscored, plays a phrase you could hum if humming wouldn't wake the gratitude. You might think no one is awake, but the cave is. It counts breaths not to measure, but to marvel. It remembers winters longer than this one and carries those memories lightly, like a scarf rather than an armor. It has kept greater storms. It has kept smaller fires. It has learned, and it has taught, and tonight it teaches again. Gentleness is a strength that does not need to lift its voice. There is a point in every night where dreams and waking exchange gifts. Dreams give color to the dark. Waking gives shape to the kindness. And between the two, you rest on a bridge that knows both banks and needs neither to be complete. The ember will yield to morning, but not yet. It has one more paragraph to write in orange script. A note about how warmth multiplies when asked politely. An aside about how a single shoulder can change the climate of a small world. A footnote proving that unity is not metaphor, but physics, measurable in the distance between two pulses that have agreed to keep time. Now, let your gaze rest on the entrance. Do not stare. Staring is a kind of violence, but regard it the way one regards the face of a friend who is nearly awake. The drift is a blue door without a handle. The sky behind it is unlocking itself a fraction at a time. Even the storm, in its afterlife as silence, seems pleased with what it made and ready to let it be. Stay just a little longer in this hour that doesn't have a name, not night, not morning, a soft seam that holds both and tears for neither. If speech comes, let it be smaller than a breath. If thought comes, let it wear socks. If gratitude comes, give it the good chair by the fire and do not ask it to explain itself. So as we come to the end of this journey, let's not leave the cave entirely. Let's stay here, just a little longer, in the quiet. Picture yourself sitting near the entrance, wrapped in furs or thick blankets, watching the pale morning light creep across the snow. The world is still. Your breath curls upward, joining the same cold air these people once breathed. The glacier hums faintly beneath you, patient as ever. Somewhere behind you, deep in the tunnels, their stories linger, not as noise, but as presence. The fire is embers now. The echoes are slow, and you, listener, are part of this long, soft thread that stretches through time. The ice will keep its watch, the wind will carry your breath, and the world will keep turning in its quiet, ancient rhythm. And so, we return to where we began, in the quiet, listening. These caves are not just spaces in the earth, they are echo chambers of time, holding laughter, fear, ingenuity, and love within their frozen walls. They are reminders that life has flourished in the unlikeliest of places, that stories have been whispered where no sunlight has ever reached, and that even in silence, human presence endures. As you rest now, let the rhythm of the glacier settle over you. The drip of water, the sigh of distant wind, the soft glow behind closed eyes. You are safe here. You are warm here. And the glacier will keep its slow watch through the night,